Uprising was condemned in no uncertain terms by a dashing colonel by the name of future US President George Washington. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to national observances. And one observance so prevalent in Britain at this time of year is Guy Fawkes Night. Every November 5th, the people of Britain gather together around a scorching hot bonfire, not the same one, and cheer like bloodthirsty animals at the burning of an effigy. It might be a bit less intense than that. Anyway, that effigy's name is Guy Fawkes, a provincial English Catholic who, along with fellow plotters, attempted to blow up the House of Lords and assassinate King James I in 1605. Now, that is intense. Basically, Fawkes' beef with old Jimmy No. 1 was that he, the king, was not a Catholic, and the ultimate goal of the gunpowder plot was to restore a Catholic monarch to the English throne. This will be important later. Of note right now, though, is that the plot failed. Authorities received an anonymous tip-off to search the Palace of Westminster, where they found Fawkes guarding a stockpile of explosives. He was arrested, tortured, and later executed after confessing to the assassination plot. Guy Fawkes Night, or Bonfire Night, has been celebrated in Britain ever since. Indeed, I recall fondly the bonfire nights of my youth, waving sparklers, marvelling at fireworks, and yelling, "Death to the traitor!" I might have made that last one up. However, little did I know at the time, but the 2008 iteration of Bonfire Night would be my last for a very long time. You see, 5 days later, I moved to the United States of America, where it quickly became clear that no such celebration existed. And why should it? I remember thinking, after all, this was uniquely an attack on the English monarchy. Why would America, with its own assortment of observances, celebrate the failure of a 400-year-old assassination plot in England? I mean, you don't see many Brits burning effigies of John Hinckley Jr., do you? Nor do you see Americans doing this, now that I think about it. The point is, November 5th doesn't carry the same connotation in America, nor does the phrase, remember, the 5th of November, unless, of course, you've watched V for Vendetta. Mostly, the date is known stateside as the day that my great-great-uncle Emmett invented time travel. But the longer that I've lived here, and the longer that I've sought to uncover all of the memos that our two countries lost in the pond, I've come to find that actually other holidays and observances did make the journey across the Atlantic. America's Thanksgiving, for example, shares many of its customs with the English Harvest Festival. Halloween, born out of Celtic tradition, was popularized in the United States by the 19th century by Irish and Scottish immigrants, and the complexions of American revelers turn as green as the river every St. Patrick's Day. Perhaps then the question is not why should Americans celebrate Guy Fawkes, but rather, why don't they? And I don't ask this question, of course, with hostility, but rather with curiosity. After all, the gunpowder plot took place a mere 15 years before the Mayflower set off for the New World. James I was still on the throne, not to be confused with the Lou, when the Pilgrims reached Plymouth Rock. Surely word of this strange English tradition would have gone with them, especially since the ship was loaded with Protestants. Well, I'm happy to report that, contrary to popular belief, it actually did, sort of. See, to learn about the rise and fall of Bonfire Night in America, let's turn the time circuits on, rev this baby up to 88 miles per hour, and set our date for November 5th, 1955. Wait, no, that's when time travel was invented. November 5th, 1623. November 5th, 1623, 3 years after the Puritans first reached America, the earliest recorded American bonfire night took place in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and by all accounts it was an abject failure. The fire, built by drunken sailors, got a little out of hand and burned down several houses. We've all done it. But this was just the start of a New England tradition, and America's version of Guy Fawkes Night took things to an entirely new level. It evolved into a highly similar festivity called Pope Night, aimed at broadening the event's primary target to Catholicism in general. By the 1700s, the event, held annually on November 5th, was particularly popular in Boston, where effigies of the Pope or the Devil were set ablaze during elaborate street parades. Typically, these were attended by the so-called dregs of society, like sailors, servants, and YouTube sensations, and basically devolved into a chance to get absolutely wankered, cause a riot, and stick it to the elites. In fact, things got so so bad it spawned gang warfare across the entire city. The north and south end of Boston basically squared off, gangs of New York style, in a battle over who should burn the effigy. It was sort of the very definition of men being idiots. Indeed, possibly owing to wild inebriation, 4 Pope Night revelers drowned in a canoe in 1735, while 30 years later the carriage pulling the papal effigy accidentally ran over a kid, fatally wounding the poor little sod. Clearly, health and safety compliance was not great. And in response, the Massachusetts General Court read the Riot Act. Literally. Between 1748 and 1769, 5 riot acts were passed, all with the express purpose of banning Bostonians from carrying pageants and other shoes through the streets and lanes of the town of Boston, abusing and insulting the inhabitants. But while the riot acts were largely unsuccessful, something happened during the ensuing years that would change Pope Night forever. The 2 squabbling factions were brought together by a common enemy: the British. You see, anti-British sentiment was building up in the colonies amid the imposition of the Stamp Act, which imposed direct tax on colonials. Under the leadership of mob boss Ebenezer Mackintosh and backed by the so-called Loyal Nine, the north and south end of Boston joined forces to vehemently oppose British taxation. In time, the anti-Catholic theme was all but lost to history, and so, gradually, was Pope Night. However, there was a brief period in 1774 when it threatened a comeback after the British passed the Quebec Act, right, guaranteeing French Canadians free practice of Catholicism. Now, this did not sit well with certain Americans who were suspicious of British efforts to assert the Catholic doctrine over North American life. This, of course, seems absurd in 2019 when there are statistically more US Catholics than there are British people, but I digress. Attempts at a resurrection were thwarted following military pushback. The uprising was condemned in no uncertain terms by a dashing colonel by the name of future US President George Washington. He had this to say in 1775. As the Commander-in-Chief has been apprised, I don't know why he spoke like this, of a design formed for the observance of that ridiculous and childish custom of burning the effigy of the Pope, he cannot help expressing his surprise that there should be officers and soldiers in this army so void of common sense as not to see the impropriety of such a step at this juncture. At a time when he's gone really deep, at a time when we are soliciting and have really obtained the friendship and alliance of the people of Canada, whom we ought to consider as brethren embarked in the same cause. In a moment of sweeping American justice, the last recorded instance of Boston's Pope Night, influenced, remember, by Britain's favourite fireworks holiday, was in 1776, the year that would famously spawn America's. And so there you have it. The British have drunken debauchery, poor planning, and George Washington to thank for the stateside absence of Bonfire Night. Worth mentioning, methinks, whenever your British friends ask. And that's it for this video. Glad we could start November off with a bang. I'm sure the rest of the month will be fire. Sorry. Until next time, all the very best from me, and remember, the 5th of November. And to hit my subscribe button. That's mainly that. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.